For our listeners who don't know, we had your husband Matt on. He's like probably the most well-known naked and afraid contestant out there. He's way up there. Been on there a whole bunch of times. And then you somehow in the process of all this said, no way, not going to do it. Not going to hang your lady parts out there in the wild and do this whole show. But what happened? Because you did it.
Well, it was this culmination of things that kind of it was sort of like a perfect storm of things. So Matt and I met back in 2012. I didn't have a lot of survival experience going, from my background. Well, Matt, he grew up, that's what he did. And it sort of became this beautiful relationship when we met. And ultimately, he proposed to me on the show. Mm-hmm. We got married. He left for the Amazon during our honeymoon. And that's when he got a flesh-eating bacteria. So there I am. I'm like, well, I just signed up for these vows of I will love you, naked in all of your adventures and clothed and everything. And then he sets off into the Amazon for 40 days. And the next thing I know is I get a phone call. He's in Ecuador in a hospital, 36 hours away from losing his foot, if not his life. And it's like things are flashing between, between my eyes, and it just became this love of adventure and this amazing passion we have for the outdoors. And he luckily didn't lose his foot, didn't lose his life, thank God, and recovered from that fully. But even after hearing all of his wild and crazy stories, I had seen he'd been to Thailand, he had been to the Amazon, he had been to Africa. He'd been to Belize, and he had been all of these places around the world. And I thought, you know what? I've had all this survival training. We've spent all this time. And I finally had this moment of this epiphany one day. We're working out, and I looked over, and I'm like, I'm ready. He's like, ready for what? I was like, I'm ready to take on this challenge. He's like, what challenge? I was like, I'm ready to take on 21 days. And he's like, whoa, like, mind blown, because never at any point did he ever influence me to take on the Naked and Afraid challenge or to do anything beyond what he felt like I was comfortable with. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was like, you know what? You've had all of your stories. I'm ready to make my own. And it was like, I went through the application process. I went through everything, and I got a call, and they're like, hey, we want to send you to Mozambique. I was like, whoa. And that's kind of when that journey began. And it was sort of this, a whole other training process that led me up to that. But it was, I guess it was just sort of this epiphany that I had that I was like, you know what, I need to do this for myself to have my own memories, because Lord knows he's got plenty of his own.
So what's interesting about that is I would have assumed, maybe I'm just projecting from my own marriage, but I would have assumed, okay, Brooke's competitive and Matt's out there and he's getting all these accolades and this attention for doing this. And you're sitting at home going, you know what? I can kick his ass. I can go out there longer and I can go do this. So I would assume that's a part of it. But you're actually sitting there going, he's having amazing life-changing experiences out there and you're not. And you're going, I want that for myself in my life. I want to see what this does for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always supported him in all of his adventures. And in fact, I've been like his greatest cheerleader, encouraging him, like, when they asked him to go to South Africa and they gave him 6 days notice and he's on the phone, he's like, well, let me check with my wife. And all I do is I give him the thumbs up because I know that he's talking about another epic adventure. And he's like, well, the producer's like, don't you need to ask your wife? And he's like, I just did. And she just gave me the thumbs up, not even knowing what I was talking about. But I knew that it was some amazing adventure. So I've always given him that full support. But I also knew that, I mean, just like you said, yes, I'm competitive. But in the same way, I felt like I needed some, I've had a lot of adventures of my own, but needed to just go and do it and experience it for myself and come back so that I'm not sitting here going, okay, Matt, so you've had, all right, so you killed a warthog and an impala and you've done all these things. So it was just sort of my own adventure that just came to fruition. And luckily, it just spearheaded me in the right direction. And I don't regret it at all.
That's awesome. So I'm assuming, there's a production crew there. I'm assuming this is all dudes, right? That you're at some point you just got to get naked in front of a bunch of strange guys and be like, all right, now I'm living off the land. I mean, isn't that wild enough? I mean,
It is.
I shouldn't say that. I know people do that every day for money, but this is a different thing.
You did yes, you hit the nail on the head, because Matt told me, he's like, I know you can take on sit challenge. I know you have the skills. I know you have the endurance. I know you have everything that it takes to get through this challenge. But he said the one thing that I know is going to be, there's the naked part and there's the naked and afraid part. And the afraid part, he said, for me was going to be stripping down to nothing. And he was absolutely right, because I'm not one of those people that loves to go out and show myself. I'm a very modest person. Mm-hmm. And literally stripping down, and you are absolutely right. It was all guys except for my producer. She was a woman, thank God. But if I didn't have her, I would have felt very, very awkward. Mind you, they're all very professional, but at the same time, it's literally you're stripping down to nothing. Yep. And you are heading off into this wilderness you have never seen before, you never experienced. And he was right. That was the ultimate afraid part for me, was bearing all to everybody. But once you literally step foot and you start your journey, you forget that whole crew is there, because you are so focused on your survival. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, whatever, I don't care about you guys. I just need to do what I need to do. And you just forge ahead. That's what happens.
It's amazing. Can I tell you a secret about myself? Well, on this note, so we were talking beforehand here, and I mentioned how I used to drink a lot, and now that I don't drink anymore, I'm afraid almost every time I'm naked. But before I wasn't. I could have been naked anywhere; it didn't matter because I drank all the time. Anyway, and that's only partially a lie. It's wild. It's wild to get over that. And to just be to recognize, okay, you have to get over that huge, and that's a big fear thing. Everybody focuses on the big critters and the eating, Matt talked about eating scorpions and stuff, but just disrobing in front of strangers who are running, super nice cameras on you the whole time, and X amount of people are going to see this footage. I mean, it's a crazy experience, but it had to be, once you got used to it, it had to be kind of liberating, right? You overcame something that most people couldn't even comprehend right there.
Oh my God. It was literally ripping off the worst Band-Aid of your entire life, ripping off hair, ripping off everything that you don't want it to rip off. And you're like, oh, this is going to hurt. This is going to hurt. And once you finally do, you're like, okay, you've got some breathing room. And now it, like you said, it is a little bit liberating, also terrifying, because now you are exposed to every single element, every single thorn, everything that literally wants to slice you open and sunburn. And you have you're just open to Mother Nature. Mm-hmm. And you just kind of have to embrace it and go with it and do what you can do, and hopefully your survival knowledge will lead you through that. But it really is this terrifying, but also yes, I can do this. Once you finally do it, you kind of overcome that fear. And for me, that was a huge hurdle.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear. Matt talked about, getting his feet ready, and, sometimes you'd have 6 days, sometimes you'd have a couple months. And what I thought about asking him that I forgot, so I want to ask you is, did you try to prepare yourself to be hungry? Beforehand, did you do, intermittent fasting or anything like that to get just comfortable in a state of hunger?
Yeah, I definitely spent some days where I tried to just kind of do some cleanses. I tried to just not think about food. I tried to just think about tasks at hand, going out and doing some survival things that it'd take me all day to do, to just from, preparing, just doing some shelter activities, fire activities, doing a lot of running. I did a lot of barefoot to, a little bit of barefoot sandal running to help prepare my body into just sort of those endurance activities, and then just focusing on just drinking a lot of water, but then also not drinking a lot of water, because I knew there was going to be days, especially on insertion day, not knowing where water was going to come from. It's going to be hot. It's going to be a long day. Am I going to get water in the first 24 hours? I don't know. I'm definitely probably going to get food. So yeah, there were definitely stretches of time where I just tried to mentally and physically prepare myself to not have any of those things, and just kind of get in that moment. But honestly, nothing truly prepares you for it until you are in that moment, and you're like, oh, this is what it feels like. It sucks.
Well, yeah, I mean, that has to be so true, even though, it sounds like you obviously you keep yourself in pretty good shape, and you were kind of, doing cardio and depriving yourself of water, depriving yourself of food to get closer. But really, there's probably nothing you can do that gets you, especially mentally, to accept that situation and understand it without being there.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things, like when you are dropped in location, prior to that, they give you a region in which they're like, okay, here's your region. But until you land, from the time you land on that plane until the time that you are taken out, in my particular location was about 8 hours from the closest village. They had to set up a base camp, and there was literally nobody else out in this area in Mozambique. And it was just completely bare, and there was nothing out there. And you get a real sense of reality of, it's literally going to be up to me to find these resources. And it's just you in this massive, vast environment that you can't even comprehend it until you land there with your own feet and you see it for your own eyes and you breathe it. Because you can, I think Matt probably talked about, you can do all the research you want and Google it and try and remember it. But until you get there, you're like, I don't remember what this tree looks like, what this plant looks like, anything. And so you're just immediately submersed into this environment. And it's a very real and very humbling experience as to like, all right, well, here I am.
Yeah, it's kind of it makes me think about being like book smart versus street smart, right?
Exactly.
Like you can do tons of research, and we've been talking about this in the hunting world a lot, where I have so much information at my fingertips now, and I have satellite imagery of everywhere I could ever plan to hunt, and I can look up all kinds of information. But, just as an example, I live in Minnesota. So if I go hunt elk in Colorado, which I've done a bunch of times, like I can look at all the aerial photography and stuff and be like, when I'm sitting at home, I'm like, oh, here's a north facing bench and here's a water hole and here's a nice meadow. And you're like, oh, this is where I'll find elk. Then you get out there and you get your pack on your back and you start hiking up the trail and you go, nope, this is reality. Like I know those features of the terrain exist and they don't matter a whole lot because now I'm in it and everything's different. You're tired. And so it's like, we have this nice disconnect a lot of times in our lives where we do have that information. Like in your situation, it is literally a survival situation. And yet even then your brain's only capable of retaining so much and taking so much of that with you to be applicable in the wild.
Absolutely. I mean, you can prepare all you want. Like, I'm one of those people that I have to learn by physically doing it. I can read up on it and I can retain that information, but until I physically have my hands on it or I see it, it's harder for me to kind of comprehend what that resource is or what I'm doing. And you're going to a completely foreign country and your whole world is different. You're just like, oh. And it's kind of like this reality shock of, all right, well, I was not, I'm prepared for this, but I also wasn't prepared for what it actually is. And it's both a beautiful and terrifying experience at the same time.
Did you find, and you were probably more in tune to this with your prep and your lifestyle already, but did you find, sort of like the line between your physical and your mental is real thin out there? Because it's kind of, it's easy to think about like the physical misery of the bug bites or the thorns, but what probably gets people out there is what's between their ears and, getting the right headspace to survive that. It's tied into the physical, but I think people would probably look at that and go, I have to be so physically ready for this. But the mental part probably has to just be this mountain you've got to like shoulder the whole time.
Absolutely. I mean, mental is probably three-quarters, maybe 90% of that challenge is mentally preparing yourself for that, but also having prior experience putting yourself in situations that, have you spent a lot of time in the backcountry? Have you done things that have pushed you further than maybe you have ever been pushed before? And for me, I've spent a lot of time doing that. And spent a lot of time also doing it solo. So when my partner tapped on day 5, day 6, I was prepared for that. I actually went into that challenge thinking, if my partner taps, I can do this. I am prepared to do this by myself. And I don't think a lot of people have that. They aren't prepared to do that. So when I see a lot of backcountry hunters, they're going in, they go in a pair and one person has an issue and it's like one person needs to go back, or so there's some kind of issue. It's sort of like one crumbles, the other crumbles. And it's sort of like, you need to help your fellow man. But at the same time, it's like when you're in a survival situation, I'm out there by myself. I have nobody else to rely on. So I kind of went into that with that. I'm capable of doing it by myself, but it is this physiological preparation that you have to put yourself through, because until you step out there, you have literally nothing. Like I had a pot, I had a knife, and I had a bow, and my partner's gone. I'm out there for 15 days by myself, and every day is like, what can I do to make every day a little bit better? And that's exactly what I did. And mentally, doing something positive that you're like, you can be proud of. Like, I found some berries. I did this. I did that. And you find one thing out of every day. Like, look at that beautiful sunrise. And you can focus on that no matter how crappy the day is. And you might feel like everything is just going horribly wrong. Like you can't do the right fish trap. You can't build the right snare. You just can't do the right thing. But if you can find something every day, your mental game is going to be always a little bit better. And that's going to help you get through every day. And that's kind of like how I approached it. Was I'm in this beautiful environment. I'm in this beautiful world. How privileged am I to be here with nothing and be able to survive it? So that's kind of how I looked at it.
I love that. And here's why. Like, we talk about, being accountable for our own happiness all the time on this podcast. And one of the things that just drives me nuts about society is so many people are unhappy and they want to make other people unhappy instead of working on themselves. And so I want to ask you, you seem like when you were there, you looked at the situation, you said, yeah, a lot of this stuff sucks, but I'm going to find something and I'm going to hold myself accountable for my mental state and my mental health and my happiness. Have you always been that way? Was this like a big reinforcer to that? Or has Brooke always been like that?
I would like to think that as a kid, I grew up in the outdoors. I grew up riding horses, and every day was sort of a beautiful day for me. Even if it was like, it felt like everything was like crumbling down or bad, or it's like, oh, I've got to do this or I've got to do that. I always try to find some shining, bright, happy moment in the day. But it really reinforced positivity in me when I spent 8 years in martial arts. And that really, I earned my second-degree black belt, and that really taught me literally every moment I spent in training was, it's hard. You're pushing yourself, but it's like finding these beautiful moments and perseverance and confidence and empowerment, and you're helping other people. And no matter how hard something gets, you have to look beyond that, and you have to see this other side to that immediate moment that you feel like, oh, this is just going to be crippling. This is going to be the end of me. Well, it's actually not. Like, you can overcome that, and it's not going to be the end of the world. So that's always sort of been I always look back on that. And, I don't know that a lot of people can, if they don't see the relationship to martial arts and hunting or being outdoors or being competitive, there really is a beautiful connection to that. And for me, that's, you're embracing sort of this self-control and confidence that, you can see the other side of something. And, in spite of the fact that my partner left, if my partner was even struggling while, maybe he had decided to stay, I would have been there the whole time trying to be his cheerleader to help him. And positive mental game is so much a part of that. So there's beautiful moments. You can find it every day. There really is.